You can feel someone pulling away before they even realize they've changed. And that gift makes trust feel less like comfort and more like risk. Most people think slow trust means you're cold, guarded, or impossible to get close to. But that's rarely what's actually happening inside you. You're not refusing connection. You're studying it. You're noticing the pause before their smile lands. You're catching the shift in their voice when your name enters the room. You're reading what people mean, not just what they say. And once you see that much, trust stops feeling simple. Because trust is easy when you only hear words. Trust gets complicated when you also hear tension, hesitation, contradiction, and hidden resentment. Highly observant people almost never meet someone at face value. Not because they're cynical, because their brain keeps collecting tiny pieces other people ignore. The forced laugh, the delayed text, the compliment that somehow feels sharpened at the edges, the warmth that disappears when someone thinks you're no longer useful. You don't need a dramatic betrayal to become careful. Sometimes all it takes is one strange silence that doesn't match the situation. One look that says more than the conversation ever will. One moment where your body goes quiet because something feels slightly off. And that slight off feeling matters more than people realize. Because highly observant people are usually not reacting to one thing. They're reacting to patterns. Patterns build slowly. But once they appear, they're hard to unsee. That's why you can seem fine with someone for weeks, then suddenly pull back. To other people, it looks random. To you, it feels earned. Something finally clicked into place. A contradiction lined up with an earlier memory. A casual comment connected with a previous expression. And your nervous system made a note before your conscious mind could explain it. That's part of why trusting slowly can feel lonely. People often want instant warmth from you. They want openness on demand. They want your real self before they've shown you theirs. And when you hesitate, they may call you distant. They may say you're hard to read. They may assume you're overthinking what should feel natural. But for observant people, caution often is natural. Because somewhere along the way, being perceptive became tied to emotional survival. Maybe you grew up in a house where moods changed without warning. Maybe peace depended on noticing tension before it exploded. Maybe love was available, but only when the room felt emotionally safe. So you learned to scan. You learned to read footsteps, tone shifts, door sounds, and unspoken disappointment. You learned that the smallest detail could save you from a bigger hurt. And even if your life looks calmer now, your instincts still remember. They still believe attention keeps you safe. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means your awareness has history. It means your carefulness did not appear out of nowhere. And once observation becomes part of your identity, trust starts moving through that filter. You don't just ask whether someone likes you. You ask whether they like you consistently. You don't just notice affection. You notice whether it changes when you're tired, quiet, imperfect, or inconvenient. You don't just hear promises. You measure whether their behavior can carry the weight of those promises. That is exhausting. Because while other people enjoy the moment, you're often reading beneath it. While they relax into chemistry, you're checking for emotional stability. While they call it a good vibe, you're wondering if it's sustainable. And sometimes you hate that about yourself. Sometimes you wish you could just let people in without translating every signal. Sometimes you envy people who trust first and process later. But that kind of ease usually comes from not saying as much. And saying as much as you do changes everything. It changes dating. It changes friendship. It changes work conversations, family dinners, and even harmless-looking group chats. You notice who talks over the quietest person. You notice who gets kind when they want something. You notice who performs empathy but disappears when things get messy. You notice who seems honest until honesty becomes uncomfortable. And once you notice those things, your body keeps score. That is why highly observant people can seem warm but still remain unreachable. They may laugh with you. They may listen deeply. They may make you feel understood faster than anyone else ever has. But inside, a gate is still closed. Not locked forever. Just waiting for evidence. Because trust for observant people is not built by intensity. It's built by repetition. Repetition without manipulation. Repetition without subtle punishment. Repetition without those small emotional reversals that make your stomach tighten. You trust people who remain themselves when there's nothing to gain. You trust people who don't punish honesty with withdrawal. You trust people who can handle complexity without turning cruel. And most of all, you trust people whose energy feels the same in public and private. That consistency matters more than charm ever will. Charm can light up a room. Consistency makes a room feel safe. Highly observant people know the difference almost immediately. Even when they ignore it, they still know. That's another painful part. Sometimes you see the truth early and stay anyway. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You tell yourself everyone has contradictions. You tell yourself maybe you're projecting old pain onto new people. And sometimes that's partly true. Not every uneasy feeling is a warning. Not every delayed reply is rejection. Not every awkward moment means someone is dangerous. Observant people can also become trapped by their own accuracy. Because when you're right often enough, you start believing every suspicion deserves authority. That can make trust even slower. Not just because people disappoint you, but because your mind becomes hard to surprise. You begin expecting the hidden motive. You begin preparing for the emotional turn. You begin staying slightly ahead of heartbreak, just in case. And living like that creates a strange kind of loneliness. You're surrounded by people, but still waiting for proof. You're included, but not settled. You're loved, maybe, but not fully convinced. Because some part of you still believes closeness can shift without warning. So you keep one hand on the exit. You stay emotionally packed. You let people meet the version of you that can recover quickly, but not always the version that genuinely needs them. This is why highly observant people are often mistaken for strong people. And they are strong. But their strength is frequently built from watching too closely, for too long. It comes from adapting. It comes from reading danger early. It comes from learning how to stay composed while quietly processing everything. That kind of strength looks impressive from the outside. Inside, it can feel tiring beyond words. Because observation doesn't switch off when you want peace. It follows you into rest. It follows you into romance. It follows you into simple conversations that other people forget 5 minutes later. You replay the wording. You replay the expression. You replay the moment their warmth changed temperature for half a second. And if you've ever done that, you know the worst part. The worst part isn't noticing. The worst part is wondering whether to trust what you noticed. Because once you say it out loud, people may call you dramatic. They may say you're reading too much into things. They may defend the exact behavior that made your body tense. So you learn another survival skill. Silence. You stop explaining why something felt off. You stop trying to prove a pattern while it's still forming. You just quietly step back. And people rarely understand that step back. They think you're being detached. They don't realize you're often protecting something very soft. Highly observant people usually have tender inner worlds. That tenderness is exactly why they move carefully. They know how deeply things can land. They know one careless dynamic can echo for weeks inside a sensitive mind. They know disappointment is rarely just disappointment when you've already seen it coming. It becomes grief, mixed with self-betrayal. Grief because it happened. Self-betrayal because you noticed early and still talk yourself out of leaving. That is why slow trust is sometimes wisdom, not fear. It's the refusal to hand your nervous system to someone unsteady. It's the decision to wait for coherence, not just chemistry. It's the understanding that closeness without safety always costs more later. Still, there is a balance. Because observation can protect you, but it can also imprison you. If every person must pass impossible emotional inspections, nobody will ever reach you. If every flaw feels like danger, intimacy will always look contaminated. If every uncertain moment becomes a forecast, connection will never get room to breathe. So the deeper lesson is not to stop observing. It's to observe with honesty. Notice the person in front of you. But also notice what old story awakens inside you around them. Notice their inconsistency. But also notice your instinct to leave before reality becomes clear. Notice red flags. But don't turn ordinary human imperfection into a threat just because it's unfamiliar. This is hard work. Quiet work. The kind nobody applauds because most of it happens inside your chest. But it matters. Because the goal is not blind trust. And the goal is not permanent distance. The goal is trust that is awake. Trust that doesn't abandon your intuition. Trust that also doesn't let old pain write every ending. Real trust for observant people usually arrives slowly and quietly. Not with fireworks. Not with instant certainty. Usually it appears in small, almost forgettable moments. Someone follows through when they didn't have to. Someone stays gentle after hearing something difficult. Someone remains kind when you have nothing impressive to offer that day. Someone's words and energy keep matching over time. And eventually, your body notices something new. Not intensity. Not obsession. Not performance. Relief. The rare relief of not having to decode every second. The rare relief of feeling safe enough to stop scanning the room. The rare relief of being with someone who doesn't keep changing emotional weather. That kind of trust is different. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't pressure you to open faster. It doesn't shame your caution. It understands that careful people are not trying to be difficult. They're trying to be honest with what they feel. So if you trust slowly, that doesn't automatically mean you're damaged. It may mean you've lived enough to recognize the cost of false closeness. It may mean your sensitivity notices what others dismiss until it's too late. It may mean you are protecting something valuable, not withholding something cruel. And maybe the deeper truth is this. Highly observant people trust slowly because they don't fall for surfaces anymore. They have seen how often charm hides carelessness. They have seen how often attention disappears once access is granted. They've seen how often people want intimacy without responsibility. So now they wait. They watch. They listen for alignment. And if that sounds like you, maybe your slowness is not the problem. Maybe your slowness is the part of you that still believes trust should mean something. Not instant access. Not emotional speed. Something earned by steadiness, truth, and the courage to stay real. Because when highly observant people finally trust, it is never casual. It is deliberate. It is sacred. And anyone worthy of that trust will never ask you to betray yourself to give it.